Hey guys, Danny Johnson here, and today I'm going to show you how to change the entire fuel pump sending unit, pump, and hat, the whole system if you buy it this way. I have another video that replaces just the pump, where you tear this assembly apart and replace only the pump. But if you're having other issues with the fuel gauge not working and that kind of thing, and your fuel pump, it's time for a new one, then this is a good idea at this time just to replace the whole thing. So I'll put the link in the description to just the fuel pump. It'll be pretty much the same video, but just tearing down the sending unit and everything a little bit more. But I'll put the link to that in the description. So first off, the least amount of fuel that you have in it, the better, obviously, since you're dropping the tank. So right now I'm kind of under a quarter tank. Then just pop your trunk. On the driver's side here, behind the taillight, behind this carpet, you're going to see the fuel shutoff switch. It's called the inertia switch, and it triggers if you get in an accident and the car feels a G-force from getting hit, and it turns the fuel pump off. So we're going to take off these little this little screw thing here. We'll get in behind here and then unplug that sensor. So once again, we're here behind the taillight inside the carpet, and this is what it looks like right here. It's just this thing with a little button on the top that you would push down to activate it, and then there's just a little tab here that we're going to undo. Just going to pull up on the front of it and slide it off, and then we're going to start the car, and eventually there will be no fuel pressure. So I just pry it up on the top of this and then hold it down with both hands. Now start the car and let it idle for a few minutes or until it runs out of fuel. Shouldn't take too long, but it can take up to a few minutes. There we go. Okay, I'm going to disconnect the negative battery terminal. For a stock terminal that's never been replaced, it's going to be an 8mm. Okay, so loosen it up and then pull it off out of the side. Make sure it doesn't come in contact, and make sure you never get metal between these two like a screwdriver. Now you can put the car in the air. So just lift it up and properly secure it on jack stand so that the back end of the car is up in the air. We're lifting on the back right here on the subframe connectors, and then that's also where we put the jack stands on each side. Then open up the fuel door, take off the cap, and you'll find 3 bolts in here that we're going to undo. 1, 2, and 3. 10mm. These 3 bolts hold up the filler neck, and I usually will get a plastic bag and label where all these screws go, but there's not really too much hardware in this fuel pump replacement. Okay, so under here by the fuel tank and the exhaust, on the tank itself you'll see this small 8mm bolt. We need to take this one off, because it's a bracket that holds that filler neck. So coming under the car, here's the exhaust. Here's some lines that are coming out of the filler neck. And this line right here is kind of the breather line. It returns back up towards the cap. So there's a little piece up here that you're going to put your screwdriver in to unlock the attachment. So here's what it looks like. It's just a little tab that you're going to pull out, and then you'll be able to pull the line down and off of it. Okay, so right next to it there's another line here. We're just going to pull it straight on it until it comes off. So we need to get inside the trunk again. We're going to take off this little securing thing here. It just pulls down, and then undo the other wing nut on this side like the other side was. And then once you get back in here, you'll see where the filler neck comes in. So inside here, we're going to be going after this line right here that's coming down off it. And once again, it just pulls off, so you just lift up on it. And it's a little easier to do when the fuel tank is still connected. So just disconnecting this hose. And here's the filler neck. Now we're going after the fuel filter. So this is the fuel filter right here. And first thing we're going to do is take off these tabs. Kind of just secure it to the lines. So just get a screwdriver and start prying, and you'll see that they start to come off. Just like that. And they just kind of hang there out of the way. Okay, so basically you just take this tool and it wraps onto the fuel line, and then as you close it, what it does is the tool goes into the fuel line and spreads out a clamp that's holding this on. And so then you'll be able to pull the hose off. But basically, just so you know, that's what you're doing, is going around that line and pushing inside of here to spread the clamp to pull it off. So now we're going to take off this side over here. So this is just another one of those disconnect tools. It's the same thing. It basically goes over the line and then comes together. And so that's what we're doing here, just putting it over the line and then pushing it into this connector. So as it goes in, it spreads a clip, and then you can pull the line off. Now be very careful, because we took quite a bath with this. Tons of fluid's going to come out of here and get you all wet. So make sure you're wearing safety goggles and just prepare to get a little wet. So now we're going to take this off right now with this band. We're just going to loosen this with our screwdriver, and that'll give us more access to slide this fuel filter out. So basically the fuel filter is sitting inside of a bracket here, and once you get it loose, it'll come out of the bracket. So now we're just going to get the fuel filter out of this cradle to better work on it. So we undid this band and kind of moved it off to the side, and then over on this side there's a little bit of a latch that you're just going to go around and out of like that. So now we're just going to pull it out of the cradle, and now we'll just have a little more access on it. So as you see, we have our fuel disconnect line tool back on here, and we're just going to push it up into this line like so, and then pull the fuel line off of the filter. Okay, so then you just pull the lines off, and this is the fuel filter right here. And so we're just going to throw it away and put the new one in when we're... Under the car here on the tank, there's going to be 3 main 13 millimeter on these straps that go along the tank. So you just undo the one here, over there, and there's one on front of the passenger side, but there's not one on the driver's side. The driver's side, it just is a hinge. We also have the fuel tank supported with a jack, just as we're going to lower it here. And now these straps will come down. Okay, so we're just starting to lower the tank now. You can see the filler neck right here that he's pulling out. Now, the grommet for this tends to tear, and so if you don't replace it, as you take hard turns, you're going to be dumping fuel. So this is the filler neck right here that we just pulled from the tank as we were dropping the tank. If you look here, this is where it goes into the tank, and what we have here in our hand is the grommet that goes around it. Now, that tends to tear and you'll spill fuel as you take hard turns, so we bought a new one of these, and I'll show you the part number on that. Something else to mention is there's a little bit of glue here, so that as you start to lower the tank it might get hung up, and if you gently pull down on it, it'll come loose. There's some other lines coming right here to the back of the tank, and you could probably just leave everything connected if you wanted, but we'll probably just go ahead and pull these apart. You just separate them here. Okay, 2001 Mustang GT. And so this is the entire housing. This has the hat, the fuel pump housing here, and the sending unit. So basically, as this float goes up and down, that's telling you how much fuel you have in the tank. And so this is what the brand new system looks like. You can see the fuel pump right here. So it's already included. And here's the fuel hat. We're just gonna have to unplug it here on the car, and then we are gonna need a fuel disconnect tool where the fuel line comes into the tank here to disconnect that. And these are a returnless fuel system on these Mustangs, so you will not have a line coming back to the fuel tank. Okay, so as you drop the tank down, we're gonna disconnect two connections. One of them is right here, and it's just going to be pushing down on this tab here and sliding it apart. And then the other one is that gray one right there in the middle of the screen, and it has a tab on the back of it too that we'll just disconnect. Okay, so we have our transmission jack here holding the tank, and it's doing a good job because we're getting it down more on the driver's side and tilting it so that we can work this filler neck out. Now you can, obviously, there's enough room here if you want to just start working on it here. You do not have to go any further, but it's not too much more work just to finish clearing this out and be able to drop the tank down a little bit more. Where we're doing a whole new hat and system, we need to get onto this fuel line here anyway, so we're probably just going to come down a little more just for a little more space. Okay, so we have our tank down here. This is our first clip that we're going to undo, so you can see you just pinch right here on the bottom and it'll separate. It comes with a new clip, so we're just going to pull that off of there to make this a little easier. But yeah, we're just pinching here, and we're going to separate this clip. Okay, so we just pinched down here and then separated it. So there's the first plug. Now we're going to follow it up into here, and we're going to remove this one. So we're just going to push down on that square tab right there. You can see it lifts that up. I'll probably do this with two hands. So you'll push down on that to lift it up and then separate that plug. Okay, so just push down and separate that. So now here's our fuel hat, and the only thing left is our fuel line here, and we're going to need our disconnect tool. Okay, so we're going to remove this clamp just by putting a screwdriver in here and lifting up. Okay, so this is just like the fuel filter. Okay, then this piece, it's like a zip tie. So you're going to just lift up on this and then pull that bottom part out of it to get this off. Okay, so you're lifting up on this one, and then you can twist the right part of it out. And that's how it kind of unravels. So see that lift up here, screwdriver in here and turn to the right. See that, so screwdriver to the right, and then that comes off. Okay, and the fuel disconnect size was 5/16. Okay, so now for the fuel disconnect line tool, it's this. So it's just this little ring that you put over the line, and as you slide it forward,
it goes inside as you push forward, and it releases the spring in here, and then you can separate this line. To reattach it, you just put the line back into it and it clicks. So we're just going to go ahead and shove this up in there to disconnect the line. Okay, so then that slides right off. Okay, so once again, this tool we just pushed forward. So it just went in there and pushed it. So now you just remove this bad boy, and that's all it was. Okay, next to remove the whole hat and the assembly, we're going to remove these 8mm screws. There's 2, 4, 6 of those. So just going to go around and remove those. Make sure nothing falls in the tank. And we're actually going to clean this at this point first so that nothing does fall into the tank. Okay, so we just cleaned the area of any debris that could fall into the tank. Now we'll just remove those 8mm bolts and pull the assembly out. Okay, so in this case, since the tank is pretty much full, we went ahead and set it flat here on the ground. We just had to undo, a few clips here on the side. Just push that up and off the tank so that you had the slack that you needed. And again, we cleared the filler tank, filler neck there where it fills the fuel tank, and we just set it flat on the ground. And so now we took out the 8mm bolts going all the way around it. We're just going to take a screwdriver and gently pry on the lip and just pull the whole housing out. Okay, so with this screwdriver here, we just pried up on this hat. And so as you lift this out, you're going to have to unravel it here. You'll see. Okay, so I'm just pushing forward. There we go, until the whole thing comes out. So what I want to show you while the pump is outside of the tank here, it's kind of hard to see it in the tank, is there's 2 tabs here, one on each side, and you have to basically pinch these in order for it to come out, because as it sits down in there, it clicks into its place with a tab here and here. So what you want to do is feel the orientation of where the float valve is. Okay, and then you'll know that it's kind of the opposite of that, and you'll just pinch those 2 and then lift the whole assembly out. Okay, so here's a better view of it. The car is going that way. The front of the car is this way. The angle of the camera is now looking back towards the back of the car. You can see the front fuel line disconnect there. So when you open this up, you're going to see these 2 tabs. There's one here, and on the opposite here. That's what I showed you outside the car. You're going to pinch both of those at the same time, and that's going to allow you to lift this out of the basket that it's sitting in. Okay, so we just pinched on these 2. We just pinched on these 2, and that's how we were able to lift this thing out. And then you just want to tilt it to get all the fuel back in there. So that whole basket's full. Okay, and then the float comes out afterwards. So now our whole system's out. We're ready just to drop our new one in. So you can see the basket that this needs to sit in. And so it has the places for the clips to go onto the sides. And then it has the little hole right here in the middle for the float to go into. Okay, but you're trying to get it to seat here and here on the bottom. You'll see where it comes down. That's where those clips go into on each side. Okay, so right here, see where it's recessed down? And then on this side, Same thing right here. So that's where the clips belong, and you can see it's kind of offset in here. It is a little flexible, so you got to just kind of bend it around. But we're trying to set this down in here, but it's kind of going down into the tank, so it's not a perfectly lined up, so that makes it a little bit difficult here. Okay, now we're just dropping the new one in. Again, the front of the car is that way. We're just going to take our float, put it right down in there. Submerge our new tank here. Okay, so here's what you're left with. This is the front of the car going that way. You can see we're sitting in our basket. Now these tabs technically belong on the outside. See where the brown is right there? They technically belong on the outsides of those. I had to pretty much set this down in there to get it to go down in. I was having a heck of a time lining that up. So the proper way, if you really want to do it, is have those tabs be on the outside, but they're sandwiched on the inside, and it's really not going to go anywhere. You can see that our float is correct here. It can go up and down, all the way up and down. Okay, so that's at the front of the tank. And so now we just fed this remaining line just kind of down in there. And we're just going to have our fuel line facing forward. So just go ahead and just snake that down in there the best that you can, and we'll tighten it back down. Okay, so now we just went back through and put our bolts back in, and we did an opposite tighten sequence like this, like you would on a tire, to make sure that it's snugged down. The hat has a nice, really thick piece of rubber, the new insulator on the bottom, so you just want to get it nice and tight in there. And you know, these bolts aren't too strong, so don't break any of them. Just get them down to where they're good and snug and really tight. You'll see the arrow pointing forward towards the front of the car, and the other giveaway is that you have your fuel line going that way. Okay, so you want to tilt the fuel tank and get the filler neck started first. You want to lube that up and make sure it goes in. That's one of the harder parts, is getting it in. Once it's in, now we can lift everything back here. We plugged in our connection here that eventually is going to go back up into there. We connected our new plug right here, and now we just have to slide the fuel line that's coming from the fuel filter back onto our new attachment right here. So we'll just pop that one on now that we have this pretty much lifted up and we got our straps underneath ready to go into place. Okay, we're going to put this clip back on, and this is the way that it goes on, as if that's the front of the car. So this little knob in the back right here is the back side. So it basically goes onto the fuel line and it hooks it in. So I'll show you here, but it's going this way. Okay, so you're just doing it like this. I'm pushing straight down on it. Okay, so that part right here is pushing on that, and that's locked in there too. So that's how this one stays on. Now we just bring our little zip tie looking one right here. We're just going to put it on right in front of it. And it just locks in, clamps onto it, just keeps it from going anywhere. Okay, so we got this back in. That's on our fuel hat here. Okay, our new connector goes right back up into here, so you just kind of push it straight up with these Christmas tree pins. That one's all done. Just make sure no wires are getting pinched under here. We're ready to finish lifting this up.
So here we have the replacement grommet. This is the original, replacements in the bag. That's the part number. And what you do is you make sure that this rim here seats in the rim of the tank. You'll wedge it in there and get it in there, and it'll form a seal. And what's really important here is to lube this area so that when the filler neck's going in, it doesn't tear the new grommet. So here's just a tiny bit of grease. Okay, not enough that would ever give you any kind of problems, but we're just putting just a tiny bit of grease inside of this to help that filler neck slide right through it. So just kind of tuck the whole backside of the grommet in as you wedge it into the opening. There you go. That's good. There we are. Okay, so we're ready to lift the tank back up. Our main concern now is that filler neck opening to the filler neck up here. So we're gonna put the tank kind of on an angle on its side and lift it up, get that in there, and then once the filler neck is in, then we can just lift the rest of the tank up and secure everything. It's also not a bad idea to put just a little bit of grease on that filler neck too, but just remember, just a tiny bit to where you're not going to get any of it into your fuel system. Okay, guide the filler neck up in to the gas door here and put those bolts back in. So we just lifted the tank back up. We're putting the bolts back in, making sure that all the hoses have cleared, and then we're just going to basically plug everything back in. So plug this connector that's just under the bumper back in, and then just push it back up into those holes. And then in here, just push this line back on. Come inside the trunk here and put this other one back on, this line right here that we had taken off. Okay, we're going to put this bracket back on here that we had taken off. Just the tiny little screw that goes on here to this filler neck bracket. Just tighten that back up. Okay, so over here we have these two lines that we need to hook back up. This one on the right just squeezes into the hole, and then remember this one on the left has the clip that we had to pull out. So this clip, what we're going to do is we're going to put this hose back on, then the clip, one little foot slides through one box, the other foot slides through the other box like this, and then it slides into place, and that's what locks it when it's already on there. So I'm going to throw it up on here first. So here's the new fuel filter, Ford product, and there's the part number if you want it. So FG986 Bravo, and so we'll just put this on. So there's an arrow on here that indicates the direction of flow, right there, and this canister part's going to clip into that bracket, so that'll also help you know which way it goes. Okay, so I just slid the filter back into its little cradle here, and remember the tab on this side comes up around and it's kind of pushed on this side of the filter there. So now I'll just tighten down this ground strap and connect both of these fuel line fittings back on. So on these clips there's kind of like a little hook, so just make sure it gets down in there going over the fuel line, and then you just push the other part back on. And then on that side, do it on this side too. And the fuel filter is now replaced. So over here on the driver's side there was a little bit of a clip that holds those two pipes that were going through the top.
Just make sure it's back in place and that those two lines are okay up in there. Okay, and then don't forget to plug your inertia switch back in. Otherwise you'll wonder why the car doesn't start. Okay, make sure the button is down too, because when you get in an accident, that's what pops up, cuts the fuel off. Okay, now the real test. Turn the key and listen for that pump to come on. There it is. You'll probably have a check engine light, so you can go to AutoZone and have them turn it off, or in my case I have a tuner, so I can turn it off with that. So the codes that are going to come up are going to represent that unplugging of the inertia switch, and so if you go to read them, you're going to see that it's the fuel pump driver module, which is a little box that's in there that goes near that inertia switch. So it's reading that it's not getting fuel. So you just go through. The other one that came up was a lack of HO2's switch sensor. So anyway, just clear those two codes out, have AutoZone do it if you don't have a tuner, and you'll be good.